All right, guys, today we're going to be making the ultimate labor of love: tender, juicy, slow cooked pot roast. And I already know that there's 1,000,001 videos on how to do this online, but that's why today I'm going to be giving you 3 date night exclusive tips that's going to make this the best Sunday dinner you've ever had. Now let's get cooking. So we're going to start off with the roast itself. This is about a 3.5, 4-pound chuck roast that I got from the store. I chose it because it has nice marbling on it, which means a little bit extra fat and a little extra flavor in the end. So I recommend that you go ahead and spend that extra $3 or $4 to get a nice looking piece like this, and you'll have more than enough to share. It's no surprise that our first step is gonna be to sear this thing. It's not only gonna lock in the flavor, but it's also gonna keep this exterior from just being mushy. But first we need to season it. Right now we're gonna keep it fairly simple because we're gonna be adding a lot more spices later on. Let's start off with a little bit of garlic powder. Let's do some onion powder. Then go in with some black pepper. And finally some Cajun seasoning. Or if that's too spicy for you, just go in with some regular salt. If you're wondering if I added more seasoning while off camera, I definitely did. And I also sneezed between takes, so I know I added just enough. Now we're gonna throw in a little bit of oil and get this all mixed together. Remember, you want every side covered on this, so don't be afraid to get dirty. And please wash your hands before doing this. Get a few dabs on the sides to get seasoning on each and every part. This bad boy is seasoned, but it's not ready to be seared yet. And here's where my first tip comes in. We don't want a cold pot roast to go into a hot pan. It's gonna take a lot longer to get that reaction and may end up burning the outside of it before it can even get to the right texture that we want. So we wanna let this come all the way up to room temperature by leaving it out of the fridge for about 30 minutes to an hour, depending on the size. While that's happening, it's a perfect time to chop up your vegetables. You're gonna need the Cajun Trinity like always: onions, bell pepper, and celery. I got it already pre-chopped so you don't have to look at it. You're welcome, I know, you're welcome. And also, if you got some garlic, go ahead and get that ready too. Today's a little special because we're gonna be adding carrots in the equation too. So let's go ahead and get those chopped up. About 2 or 3 of these should suffice. You don't have to cut them in any particular way. However, I do recommend keeping it in bite-sized pieces. I gotta be honest, I was finally guilt-tripped into getting a Dutch oven. You know, if I had it my way, I'd be using my pressure cooker. It cuts the cook time down to about half, and I think it tastes just as good. But we're gonna try something a little bit new here today. I'm sorry, baby. A couple tablespoons of any neutral oil should work. So nice and easy, we're gonna drop this in presentation side first. And you want it to get as flat as possible so you can get the most even sear on there. That's just the sound we want to hear. At this point, everything's gonna start smelling good. You're gonna see a little bit of browning along the edges, and it's gonna be super tempting to flip it over. That's when you really gotta lock in. Takes about 3 or 4 minutes for it to get a good sear at the bottom. Look at that right there. That is a great first sear on there. I may leave it down just a little bit longer, but I think we're off to a good start. After you spend about that same amount of time with the other half, you'll want to try and pick it up and also get it on its sides, all right? Because sides need love too. You know what else needs love? The subscribe button. We've recently hit our first milestone by reaching 100 subscribers, and again, I have to say thank you to each and every one of you all who are supporting this channel. Now, our next goal is to reach 300 subscribers, and I have no doubt that this community is going to be able to do that. So if you're enjoying this video, please make sure to like, subscribe, and share the video to a friend or someone who doesn't really know how to cook. Now, let's get back to cooking. And we got the sear almost exactly how we wanted it, so you'll go ahead and nice and gently pull it out the Dutch oven. Set it to the side. On first glance, it may look like we just made one big mess and need to go ahead and clean out our pan, but this is actually called the fond. It's gonna be little burnt bits that are full of flavor. We're gonna get that off the bottom in a little bit. However, you'll wanna turn on your heat again. We're gonna turn on the heat again, add a little bit more oil, and start adding our veggies. And before we get too far ahead, let's go ahead and set our oven to 375. A little bit more oil, not too much though. We're not trying to fry these. And then get your Trinity in there. You hear that? That's your ASMR fix for the day, weirdo. After about 5 or 6 minutes, you want to throw in way too much garlic. It's key that you add this towards the end of cooking all the vegetables. Garlic is the easiest one to burn. It's gonna leave your food with a very bitter taste, so be careful with it. Once that garlic becomes fragrant, we're gonna add in 1 can of tomato paste. Now that we have our vegetables tender and the tomato paste has been reduced down a bit, we're gonna go ahead and deglaze the pan with a little bit of red wine. About 1 or 2 ounces should do just to lift that fine and bring out all the flavor. Ready for tip number 2? Well, here it comes. Most people right now will either add in some beef stock or some chicken broth. However, you wanna take that same exact bottle of wine that you used to deglaze the pan and get the entire thing in there. 1, 2, 3, release them. I wish that heaven had a phone so I could call. And you may be thinking, date night, why the heck would you do that? Well, the alcohol content within this is actually gonna help break down the fibers of the pot roast, making it even more tender. If you're dying to know which red wine to use, I used a full-bodied Merlot that cost about $5 in the store. We're gonna season this thing with everything but the kitchen sink. Let's go. Classics first. Onion powder. Bao. Garlic powder. Boom. Black pepper. And gotta go with the classic. Cajun seasoning. You want a tiny bit of spice, so I'm just gonna do a couple shakes of cayenne pepper, a few dashes of smoked paprika. To give the roast its signature flavor, we're gonna be adding in a generous amount of chicken and beef bouillon, probably like a 1-to-2 ratio to be a little bit more specific. So we're gonna go in with this. You can also use like chicken or beef base or one of those better than bouillons. That's also a good option as well. To balance everything out, I'm just gonna add a pinch of brown sugar. For our aromatics, we're gonna throw in a few sticks of rosemary and thyme. Just cause I like y'all so much, I'm gonna give y'all tip number 2B. So right before putting the pot roast back into the Dutch oven, I'm gonna put in about 1/4 cup of cognac. Those spices and that kind of fruity aromatic flavor is really gonna pierce through the meat itself and accentuate it so well, trust me. This little step is gonna be great. And if you're wondering or have dietary restrictions, you don't have to use any of those components inside the dish itself. Just use the beef stock, it's gonna taste just as good. Now that I have this back up to a simmer, we're gonna reintroduce our pot roast to the Dutch oven. Gently in, cause this is extremely hot, and down we go. The hard part's done. Now all that's left is to close the lid. All right, it's in here simmering. Let's go ahead and get in here for about 1.5 hours. We'll check on it and go from there. We're at about the 1.5 hour mark, so I'm gonna go ahead and do a little bit of a progress check. All right, now just look at that right there. That is cooking down so perfectly. Now that we're getting close to the end, it's time for tip number 3. And I know some of you guys are wondering, hey, didn't we cut up some carrots earlier? And you're exactly right. But we're gonna be putting it in at this stage of the process, simply because we don't want it to get too mushy, all right? You don't want them to be crunchy, of course, but they should be a little bit firm so you get that perfect balance. So we're gonna go ahead and add that in right now. This will also be a great time to add in your baby potatoes if that's your preference, but I'm gonna be putting over some mashed potatoes, so that seems a little bit redundant. Let's go ahead and get this back in the oven. All right, guys, and that hour is up. Let's see what we're looking at here. Guys, this is looking perfect and smelling even better. What I like to do now is take a separate container and get all of the pot roast in there. And, oh, come on, tenderism, come on. While the pot is still hot, I like to mix in a few tablespoons of cornstarch and cold water to make a little bit of a slurry. This is gonna get that sauce to be thicker and more like a gravy. And there you have it, juicy, tender, slow cooked, red wine braised pot roast, just in time for the holidays. Guys, like I said, this one's definitely a labor of love, and it took me a long time to go ahead and get it to perfection. But I think in the end, it's way worth it, especially if you got that special someone in your life. Anyways, guys, happy holidays. And if you've enjoyed this video, don't forget to subscribe and leave a like so you don't miss anything from the date night.